Hey everyone. So, Danny Lee asked me a seemingly simple question, but one that ends up being infinitely complex because it sets off such a chain reaction of, that's your ranking? No. So, Danny asked, will you rank Kanye's albums from your least to most favorite and why? And I've tried to do this a few times now. The first video was like 30 minutes and I had just finished College Dropout. Uh, so that's if that tells you how much I was trying to justify my rankings and explain everything, it was hard to do. So I think instead of me trying to explain everything up front and justify everything, I will give you my rankings, least to most favorite, and then allow you to ask whatever questions that you have. And in a second video, just go ahead and comment on this one. Any questions you have, any thoughts, any concerns. I'm sure you'll have concerns and questions. I'll make a second video going through all of those, explaining my thought process, answering all the questions, and we can do that rather than me trying to address everything that you may or may not be wondering and making an hour-and-a-half video of me just sitting here talking through every Kanye album. That's what our podcast is for, you know? So I do want to say before getting into it that Kanye West is a master at making amazing music and amazing albums, and that I think you can objectively argue for any album. And I'm not just saying this as like a fan, but as, I don't know, I guess a critic that I am, as a film critic, as a writer looking at Kanye's body of work, that you can objectively make an argument for each album being the best one. It just really depends what metric you choose, as each album does something unique so fucking well that makes it stand out from the rest. And you do see kind of the early and late dichotomy that's very similar to Ye. Ye is structured in a 3-1-3 structure, with the first three tracks being the darkest thoughts, and then Would It Leave acting as a turning point, followed by the last three tracks being Beautiful Thoughts, which plays out that opening tension of sometimes the most beautiful thoughts are beside the darkest that Kanye keeps repeating. He's telling us the structure of the album without telling us this is the structure of the album, but he's setting it up, and then we can see that reflected in the soundscape of the first three songs versus the last three songs. And his discography works in kind of a similar way. The first three tracks, or first three albums, operate in a different kind of aesthetic values than anything after My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. So Yeezus, Life of Pablo, and Ye are kind of opposite aesthetic values than the first three albums. So you really do get a dichotomy between what's being focused on in the first three and what's being focused on in the latter three. And that creates tension in the fan base, right? With 808s and Heartbreak and My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy kind of being balance points of Kanye using the art frame and art aesthetic that he'd go on to use on Yeezus, Life of Pablo, and Ye, balancing it with the pop aesthetic that he used on College Dropout, Late Registration, and Graduation. That's what makes 808s and My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy kind of stand out in their own ways and be kind of neutral ground for a lot of people who feel very strongly about the front end or back end of Kanye's discography. I think it's really similar to movies, right? Like, there are people that really love horror movies, and their rankings of what the best movies ever are going to be influenced by defaulting to horror, where people that default to comedy movies will have a different list of movies. You know, somebody that loves horror, somebody that loves comedy could both watch a Paul Thomas Anderson movie and hate it, where somebody that loves a Paul Thomas Anderson movie and those kinds of like art-driven dramas could watch something like Die Hard and be like, nah, get this out of here. I don't think there's any right answer. It just depends on what you're valuing in that moment. And Kanye's albums are diverse enough that there are many different values that you can choose from. And when that value is primary, the albums that are closest to that value are primary. So that's all my preamble into getting into my list. And again, whatever concerns, questions, thoughts you have, you want me to address in the follow-up video, leave them down below. I'm just going to list them right now, and then we can follow up. So coming in at number 8 is A College Dropout. Coming in at number 7 is Late Registration. Coming in at number 6 is Graduation. Coming in at number 5 is 808s and Heartbreak. Coming in at 4 is Ye. And I guess I'll explain a little. I think Ye is doing so much and is so like magnificent in what it's doing, but I'm somebody that really likes like epic largeness, maximalist rather than minimalist. So Ye being as minimal as it is, while it packs a punch, it's still just not quite in my what I want most from an album. So that goes in at number 4. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy comes in at 3, and then Yeezus at 2, and Life of Pablo comes in at 1, but Yeezus and Life of Pablo flip-flop an awful lot. But they end up being where they are. And if I was going to tier them rather than rank them in the way I just ranked them, in the top tier for me, it's the most recent 4. Ye, Life of Pablo, Yeezus, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And then in the next tier, it's 808s and Graduation. And then in the third tier, it's Late Registration and College Dropout. And that's nothing against College Dropout and Late Registration. I still fucking love College Dropout and Late Registration. It's just they're not doing some of the things that I love that the other albums are doing. So ask away, and I'll get to all of your thoughts, questions, concerns. I can illuminate more on that. If you want me to talk about specific tracks, I can talk about specific tracks. If you want me to explain things like narratives on the albums or narratives on certain songs, themes, I can do that. I'm well equipped to talk about all those things. So, yeah, please ask away. And then, by the way, our Spaceship episode just came out on iTunes and Spotify and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. So if you want to listen to us break down I'll Fly Away, Spaceship, and how it compares to All Falls Down and sets up Jesus Walks, it's a really good episode, really illuminating about the early narrative buildup and thematic buildup that College Dropout does. So I think you'll get a kick out of it if you give it a listen. I'd really appreciate it. And if you want to help the channel grow, which I would appreciate very much, you can do so in 2 easy ways: liking and subscribing. Both of those things help with visibility. It tells YouTube that people are enjoying this content, so YouTube features it more, which goes a very long way. So I'd appreciate that. And hope you're all having a good day, and looking forward to seeing the questions. Some of the anger, I'm sure. I also disagree with me, so yeah. And I'll get to those. Cheers.